Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today for Idaho Partner for Good's November Breakthrough Series. And for those of you watching the replay, thanks for tuning in. Idaho Partners for Good is a nonprofit based out of Idaho, and we're growing to reach all the regions of our state. Our mission is to reinvent how people give, share expertise, and do greater good together. By doing this, we develop stronger, healthier, better equipped nonprofits so they can do more of what they do best. One of the ways we share expertise is by offering these free monthly workshops covering a variety of topics with real-life application. And many of our Breakthrough Series guests are also members of the Impact Team. When your business hires the Impact Team consultants, you get innovative leaders who excel at designing strategy, addressing talent and organizational challenges, and bring global perspectives for local solutions. As the social enterprise for Idaho Partners for Good, the Impact Team believes in helping you do double the good. When you create a thriving business, you create space for the community to thrive. Learn more about hiring the Impact Team for your consulting needs on our website. Another unique expression of Idaho Partners for Good is that they come alongside local nonprofit grantees with unrestricted grants coupled with technical assistance for up to 3 years. Our capacity builders share their expertise with grantees to ensure their operations and infrastructure are effective and sustainable. Idaho partners who give financially are invited to nominate and vote for grant recipients. We recently concluded voting of our 3 finalists and have selecting our 2023 grantee. And you can stay up to date on this journey by following us on our social media platforms. Throughout this workshop, we'll be monitoring the chat, so feel free to respond with your comments or questions for our speaker. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to this month's guest speaker, Blossom Johnston. Blossom is the founding director of Idaho Partners for Good. She's worked for Governors Kempthorne and Risch's administrations and has over 35 years of experience with Idaho's philanthropic and nonprofit sectors. She's worked in all 44 counties and with over 1,000 nonprofits, every school district, higher education institutions, and more than 100 churches. She is transforming the way individuals, companies, and foundations give so they have community impact that they can prove. Blossom created Idaho Partner for Good's strategic charitable giving 101 presentation that is changing the way businesses and foundations invest their charitable dollars. Today, she's sharing with you how to give better so your year-end investments make the biggest impact on you and for those you give to. Please help me welcome Blossom by either snapping, clapping, or using your emojis.
I found it a whole lot more exciting than I really am. All righty. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, we strategically positioned this month's Breakthrough Series on Giving Tuesday. So we are entering, and we have entered, the biggest giving period of the year, and it is Giving Tuesday. So how many of you have gotten blasted with some emails and social media posts on Giving Tuesday? How many on, just roughly, how many emails and other asks have you gotten in the last few days?
I'm not sure I could put my finger on a number, but it's been a lot.
I got 10 just today.
Wow.
I've gotten well over 20 now. And so my next question is, how did that make you feel?
It's interesting. I think there's the charities that I know that I'm already committed to, and I focus on those messages. And then there's a little stress from everybody else asking because there's so much need. Does that make sense?
Kimber, how about you? How did that make you feel?
Overwhelmed. I'm just unable to do what I wanted to do, but a bit overwhelmed.
Let's get started and let's talk about the philanthropic sector in the United States in particular. and how it's broken, it's inequitable, and at times causing harm. So our whole message is, if we want better results, then we have to give in a better way. So this whole concept of Giving Tuesday is a great concept. Unfortunately, at this point, it's now backfired, and it's essentially made the nonprofit sector beg for crumbs. And so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the donor side of this equation of philanthropy, and we're going to dissect what's working and what's not working. Then we'll learn about Idaho Partners for Good strategic charitable giving framework and how it can help in order to give better so that nonprofits get better. So one thing we all know that the global pandemic has done is it's made us all reevaluate our lives. And for many, it's stirring a desire for a greater purpose. And so there's a better way just ahead. Let's understand, first of all, the weaknesses and the strengths of the philanthropic sector. And so let's start with the weaknesses. Self-perpetuating. Now, sometimes self-perpetuating can be a good thing, but in this case, the self-perpetuation is of things that are inequitable and really focused on the wrong end user. So traditionally, philanthropy has been this huge power imbalance where you have the group that has the money and the group that wants the money and is essentially willing to do whatever it takes in order to get the money. Then you have this concept of donor intent. There's nothing necessarily wrong about donor intent. Where donor intent can really get in the way, though, is when donor intent precedes and triumphs over the end user. Then the restricted funding approach is the traditional approach, which essentially means you restrict your funding specifically to programs and services, thereby leaving the admin and operations wanting for care and nurture. There is a huge lack of diverse perspectives to inform philanthropy. Then people of color are usually required to jump through more hoops, and they see themselves as more of a liability than an asset. And I just was reading some research, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, but I'll bring it up right here, because there were a number of women of color who are leaders in their sector that on a regular basis question whether they should move out of the position because they are women and because they are women of color. And so they see themselves more as a liability than an asset. So that's inherent in the traditional philanthropic method. The next thing is mindsets. I have heard this so many times, and raise your hand if you've heard it too, that the nonprofit sector just can't be trusted to allocate their investments wisely. You know, they're just like, okay, well, we've got to tell them because we know more, we're business people. And in fact, you hear that so often that it's really done a number on the mindsets of the nonprofits. So the last piece of the weakness is around a lot of people, when they learn about the unrestricted approach, they just don't see it as a fit for themselves. All right. Let's toggle over to the strengths, which are ginormous and transformative. First of all, the philanthropy is a powerful lever for community change. They have the ability, and often do, fund collaborations. They have the ability to change their models and their approaches really quickly. They have great influence on other people of wealth. There's typically less bureaucracy overall in the philanthropic sector versus other sectors such as the government sector. They have an ability to incentivize innovation, but often what happens is that they have the traditional side. Essentially, they see innovation as risk. And so what we need to do is turn that around and reframe it and incentivize innovation so they can do things better and differently. This is another ginormous thing that comes out of new research is the ability to transform and embolden leaders of nonprofits to dream of what's possible for their organization. And then the last thing is to truly help move the traditional nonprofit mindset of scarcity and competition to one of abundance. So you've got both weaknesses and strengths, and that's just part of the system right now that we're working in. I'm going to stop to see if anybody has any questions. So before we move off of this slide, I just want to let you know that most of philanthropic giving and the power comes from individuals. All right. 68% of all giving is done by people like you and me. That's $327 billion. And that was just in 2020, came from individuals. Next are foundations such as the J.A. and Catherine Albertson Foundation or the Idaho Community Foundation. They give about $100 billion, which is about 19% of the pie. That is then followed by bequests, which are at about $47 billion and contributes about 9% of the pie. And then last but not least are the corporations, which give about 4% of the philanthropic giving, approximately $21 billion. So because most charitable giving in 2021 was made by individuals, not foundations, not corporations, in order to give better, to get better, it begins with you and me. Okay, how many, I mean, this is a fairly recognizable face now, and there's a reason why. It's because she's become the most prolific philanthropist in history. She has donated over $13 billion to more than 1,200 nonprofits in less than 2 years. She's giving bigger gifts and much faster than anyone else. She has fundamentally disrupted the philanthropic sector single-handedly. But is she actually solving anything? There's some early indications that she's actually beginning to move the needle. Now, of course, you and I may not be able to give what Mackenzie can give, but what we can do is we can leverage our time, our talent, and our treasure together to make a greater impact on our community. So the report I was mentioning earlier is from the Center for Effective Philanthropy, and it's titled Giving Big, the Effects of Large Unrestricted Grants on Nonprofits. And it's all about Mackenzie's giving and how it's shifting leaders' thinking. It's helping them to dream about what's possible with them and their organizations. And it's actually making dreams become a reality. By the way, just little tidbit of trivia. The median size of her gifts is $8 million. So while we aren't Mackenzie Scott, Idaho Partners for Good is a crew of people who have the courage to take on this monumental task of disrupting the philanthropic sector for better results. We are standing together to reinvent how Idahoans give, share their expertise, and do greater good together. Some of us may be able to give just a few dollars, and others may be able to give thousands. But what makes us a standard setter are the mindsets we use and the tools that we deploy. Together, we're setting a new standard for the way philanthropy is done in Idaho. All righty. Everyone gives, but do we give well? Idaho Partners for Good developed the strategic charitable giving framework to help answer that question with you. The 9 elements work together to help you give better. There are 4 internal elements that need to be attended to first. Then the external 5 are the behaviors that follow the intention. Our impact team is available to help companies and foundations get the most out of their charitable giving. Having said that, we also come alongside individuals. So according to a recent USB wealth management report, 9 out of 10 women believe money is a tool to effect change. And 7 out of 10 increased their giving in the past 2 years, essentially as a result of the pandemic. 79% of them want to align their investing with their values. So how do we have the biggest impact possible? First of all, we learn, then we do things differently. This requires courage to confront our own mindsets, our biases, before we disrupt the way things are done, using the right tools and a sense of accountability. It's time to start solving our biggest community challenges with a whole different approach. All right, here's where we're going to get some more interaction. I want you to answer the question, why do you give? Whether it's your time, your talent, or your treasure, why do you give?
When I feel aligned with the mission and vision and purpose.
Okay.
I was going to say the same thing, because I believe in the work they're doing.
Yeah, I would echo that, and that that I have confidence that it will make a difference to something that's important, right? So that belief, like Kimbra said, like I believe in this, and I believe that it's the best choice out of so many good choices.
Awesome. So for many, it's about that virtuous. It just keeps giving good. No matter what we do, it just keeps giving out good. And that's what we all want to be part of. Others, it's because of the tax benefit. Pure and simple. It's they need the tax shelter. That's great. Understand your motives. What do you want to get as a result of your giving? So we are a multi-generational movement that believes that we need to start young with our children and our grandchildren and teach them about being able to understand why giving is so important. So it's that first part of understanding your motives. Then we've got to deal with our blind spots. We all have them. Doesn't matter who we are. Doesn't matter what seat we sit in. We all have blind spots that we have to understand, because oftentimes what happens in the philanthropic sector is the more you can give, the higher up you go, the fewer people you have that you trust, and the more they look and act like you. And so there's a natural bias that happens. It's not good, it's not bad. It just is, that we have to pay attention to in order to understand that we may actually be perpetuating some of the same biases that we understand aren't great, but because of proximity or similarity or affirmation, we do those things. So we really have to understand what our blind spots are. The next thing is about being intentional, explicit, and having a sustained focus on DE&I. In a state like Idaho, we have some real challenges when it comes to the issue of DE&I, because very few people are in a decision-making position or a position of power that are diverse. So part of what we are intentionally doing is to cultivate more of a diverse teams within IP4G, on our board, with our grantees. So we're trying to be very intentional and explicit about our DE&I efforts. The last piece of that is to really identify the challenge, the issue that you want to solve for with your investments. So unfortunately, because most of us can't give those billions of dollars, we just say, well, I can give this much, so I don't know how much it's helping, but I'm going to give it anyway. I think we need to flip our thinking and start asking questions around, what if we all gave together? How might we solve a challenge? instead of just saying, okay, well, mine doesn't really, it's not that much, so I really can't impact something. So we have to flip our thinking to really begin to find like-minded people who will come alongside us to help solve for challenges instead of just, I don't want to say, I will say it, dinking around the edges, okay? Dinking around the edges is wasting a lot of resources. Let's really go in to our charitable giving with the framework of let's solve something. Whether it's within let's just take something, for instance, let's just take homelessness, because that's the area that we're working in right now. What is something we could solve for? Well, guess what? We're helping companies solve for employee retention as a approach to helping their staff members stay in housing, stable housing. So we could solve that with our giving if we really wanted to. We could help companies address this issue for their own employees so their employees never go homeless. Okay, so we have to start flipping our thinking from, okay, well, here's my little bit, to how about we collaborate, come together, and we solve something. All right, so those are that's the internal work we have to do. Now the external. I am to blame as much as anyone else about starving those you feed, because I understood that through the narratives that get passed down from generation to generation is that everything should go to programs and services. And what it does when we do that is we're starving the organization's operations and their administration, which is vital for the programs and services. So we have to start rethinking how we give, and we have to stop giving in a restricted manner. We need to turn loose with wisdom. We have to know the organization, but don't restrict your funding. Use some of your funding for capacity building, because that's how that organization is truly going to be able to do more of what they do best. That is the model for Idaho Partners for Good, is we build capacity for 3 years with grantees so that by the time we exit, they go from here to here. So that is really that's the long game. And that's where we're playing. We also use design thinking. This is fundamentally transformational when we use it well. Remember I talked about donor intent versus end user? This is where this really comes into play. We have got to design with the end users so that they truly get what they need. In our case, the end user is grantees or the foundation or our clients. So we are getting in the trenches with them, and we are designing based on the data that they have, based on observations, focus groups, interviews. We just collect an assortment of data, and then we get inspired around that data. We ideate around that data, and then we implement through prototyping and testing. The next part is assessing and evaluating. I do put a real emphasis on simple. Most nonprofits do not have internal expertise for collecting a volume of data. So we have to help them assess in ways that make a difference for them, but is also simple to do. There are grants out there, especially government grants, that take them so far off their mission and tie up staffing just to do the reports and the evaluation. That is not a good use of their time or their talent. And so we are a big proponent of designing simple assessments that they can use on an ongoing basis to evaluate. One of the things we use is called the organizational capacity assessment. That is a way for us to do a 360 on the organization so that we can truly see what their strengths and their weaknesses are. And then going back to the unrestricted grants that McKinsey gives, we've really got to stop hamstringing the nonprofit sector by just using a restricted funding program or approach. So all 9 of these elements require a great deal of intention, a change in our behavior, the way we support and resource. And that's where Idaho Partners for Good excels, is we are we have deep expertise, and we can support, coach, and resource our grantees. Okay, I'm going to stop for just a minute because that was a lot of data, a lot of information. And so any questions about any specific parts or pieces, or maybe feedback on your experience with these types of elements?
I think I could just say that from experience working in nonprofit and higher ed, so many of the grants that we get fall into all of the pitfalls that you've identified. You know, we get funding to give scholarships to students, but not to support the students through highly qualified staff, for instance. So, you know, just one example. And so, and then we'll have partnership grants through the federal government, for instance, with others in the community. And again, there are these very earmarked funds. And it just, it hamstrings us.
Kimbra, any input?
No, I worked in the nonprofit sector for several years, and I ran into the exact same thing where very well-intentioned, heartfelt gifts came in, but they came in so designated and so specific that we weren't able to do the things that we really needed to get done at that moment. And so while we loved having the gifts and we loved the heart of the donor, those restricted gifts were not always as purposeful as they could have been.
This approach, the strategic charitable giving approach, is not sexy, but it is fundamental. Strong operations and infrastructure will lift an organization and its people. Without strong HR, evaluation, governance, technology, marketing, finances, and other things, our nonprofits cannot go the distance. Here's your call to action. The next 5 weeks, actually it's now, is it 5? Yeah, next 4 or 5 weeks are part of the biggest giving period of the year. That means that most of us are planning on donating to at least one nonprofit. So I'm asking you that now that you know more, it's up to you and me to do better. So I hope that you'll own your role in this space. And you start by knowing yourself. So this is a quote from Aristotle: knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. So remember those, that first part of your biases and why you give, your values. So start there. Then accept your role in improving an equitable system. Then learn what works and do more of that. Those were the 9 elements. Please don't starve the organizations that you care about by restricting your funding. And then test out new ways of giving. How might you do something that's different that actually helps incentivize the nonprofit to take more risks, to become more innovative, and to get unstuck from a position that philanthropy has put them in? So learn what works. That's part of what we're doing here. And if you think the impact team would be a beneficial part of your strategy for giving, then just let us know. All right, so there's one more. This is our gift to you and your loved ones. So in the busiest, most chaotic season of the year, let's be known for promoting the right stuff. Our gift to you and your loved ones is this kindness challenge. We are intentional about the need to grow givers from a young age. Our multi-generational approach is important to us, And we want you to take the time to do the stuff that creates long-lasting memories with those you love, both young and older. So we invite you to share it with your networks and tag Idaho Partners for Good. And with that, I am going to throw it back to you, Kimbra.
Well, thank you, Blossom. And thanks to all of you for joining us for our November Breakthrough Series. We'll be sending a follow-up email with the Kindness Challenge and the link to this presentation soon so that you can watch it again or share it with others. And once again, we host these workshops monthly on all kinds of topics. We're off in December, but we'll be back in 2023 with an exciting new lineup. As always, you can register on the events page at idahopartnersforgood.org, and we encourage you to bring a friend. Cheers, everybody.